Welcome to the Wolverine TV. I am Clayton Sayfie with EJ Holland. We are from thewolverine.com. Check us out over there. Use the promo code BLUE60 to get all of our premium content for free for 60 days. You can get all the recruiting scoops. Huge recruiting weekend coming up for Michigan. We'll talk about that later on in the week in a video, and EJ's had a ton of updates on that with kids coming to campus. But here we are going to talk about the recruits that we saw over the weekend, break them down a little bit, give some takeaways from what we saw on the field. So, EJ, you had a huge trip down to Miami. You were able to see Jaden Hood, Michigan linebacker commit, Jayden Mcburrows, cornerback commit. They are teammates for St. Thomas Aquinas down in Fort Lauderdale. And then they played against American Heritage, who had a couple targets, guys with Michigan offers as well. So I guess we'll start there. I was out to see Andrell Anthony, Michigan wideout commit, in East Lansing. So we'll start with EJ, your big trip and takeaways from seeing those commits, and then some of the underclassmen guys that you're able to see.
Yeah, it was a huge national matchup on ESPN2. Obviously, St. Thomas Aquinas and American Heritage are two South Florida powerhouses, two of the premier programs nationally. So both loaded with talent. Starting off with the commits, Jayden Mcburrows had a really, really good game. If some of you guys got to watch along on ESPN2, I was obviously there live, but the game was broadcast nationally. So if you got to watch, some of the game, you saw McBurrows really stand out. Not necessarily in what he did from wow plays, like he had a couple of tackles, but more importantly, his name wasn't called a ton because he didn't get many balls thrown his way. He was targeted once and almost came away with an interception on that one target. So it's like I mentioned on Twitter when someone tweeted at me, "Where's McBurrows? I haven't heard his name all night." Well, that's a good thing for a corner if you're not hearing his name at all. So he was, great against a taller wide receiver. McBurrows isn't that typical long, rangy corner that Michigan likes to recruit. I mean, he's close to 5'10", maybe right about 5'10". So he's a shorter guy, but he did a great job locking up a taller receiver on the outside. He played on an island for most of the game, saw some time in the nickel, but he's not necessarily a super fast guy. Like he's not extremely fast straight line, but he's quick. He does have good speed. He has good feet, good patience, really good technique. So he builds his game around that. Like I said, he doesn't have the length, he doesn't have the height, and so I think that limits him from a rankings perspective. I wouldn't really argue too much against his high 3-star 5.7 rating, though I do think that I would probably rate him as a low 4-star 5.8, so a slight bump. But again, I know the limitations he has from a height and length standpoint. I mean, he is definitely on the smaller side. But, I saw him excel out on an island. And I think, when you look at Michigan's defensive schemes, that's what they run, a lot of press man. And I think McBurrows is built for that type of coverage. You've seen Michigan recruit tall, lengthy corners on the slower end that aren't necessarily getting the job in press man. And if you don't recruit supreme talent with those traits, then you can't really run press man. So like a Will Johnson is very long and a supreme talent. Damani Jackson's very long and a supreme talent. But if you're not landing those types of guys, then I think the next best thing is to get some guys that already play man and excel at man at the high school level. And McBurrows, again, was terrific out on an island, took away his side of the field. Jaden Hood was very underwhelming. This is a guy that we've talked about as one of the most underrated commits in the class, and I think we need to take a step back from that. He just transferred over to St. Thomas Aquinas this offseason, but it's taken him a long time to get adapted. He started the game and then got pulled for the entire second half, denied to do an interview afterwards because he, had a really rough go at it. Understandably, but at the same time, it's tough to really grasp why he's not excelling at a premier program like St. Thomas Aquinas. And I think that brings up some question marks about, his ranking, about where he should really be. I do think he's a very athletic prospect. He did show some of that speed where you're like, okay, this guy can cover a ton of ground, but he missed gap assignments. He couldn't shed blockers to save his life, and he just wasn't. He wasn't following assignments. He just looked kind of lost out there, and coming over to St. Thomas Aquinas, a complicated defensive scheme run by NFL Hall of Famer Jason Taylor. I think that he's just had a tough time adapting to that mentally, where, at his previous school, he was just kind of an athlete out there allowed to run with reckless abandonment and no true technique or no true gap assignment. He was just the best athlete out on the defensive side of the ball. And I think in a real defensive concept, he just hasn't been able to really succeed in it. So it'll be interesting to see how he transitions over to Michigan, especially knowing that going in. But Hood's a smart kid. I don't really get why it's not coming all together as a senior, unless there's been some regression there. So that was kind of tough to see from him. On the flip side, the opposite sideline, American Heritage is home to 4 underclassmen offers for Michigan. The highest ranked of them is Earl Little Jr. His father, Earl Little Sr., played at Michigan, or actually enrolled at Michigan, transferred to Miami during his freshman year. But there's no love lost there. He still really likes Michigan. Earl Jr. likes Michigan, talks to Michael Zordich all the time. He's one of those tall, lengthy corners that has a ton of talent. So I really like what he brings to the table. And then you had Rivals 250 defensive end Marvin Jones, also in the 2022 class. He is listed at 6'4", 195, but he's added some good weight. I think he's up to about 210. I think he can be kind of a pass rusher, or if he continues to add weight, he could play down as a 5-tech. So either he can be a hybrid guy, either a stand-up guy off the edge or a true 5-tech. His father played for Florida State and in the NFL, but Michigan just offered in September, and he's having some conversations with Sean Nua, as is 2022 defensive tackle Richard Thomas. So as you can imagine, American Heritage's defensive line is pretty loaded. Richard Thomas is a 3-star guy. He's a really intriguing prospect with some upside. And lastly, you had David Vidalla in the 2023 class. Michigan was the first to offer him, and the only school that's offered him so far. Again, 2023 linebacker from American Heritage. He is a ball player. He had 12 tackles. He was all over the field. He was the most impressive from a statistical standpoint of the 4 underclassmen, but he's very much on the short side. Normally, I don't mind short inside linebackers. It is what it is. If you're 5'11", 6 feet, you can still excel as an inside linebacker, but he may be 5'10". Like, he's Mcburrows' size from a height standpoint. So if he grows, he'll be a top recruit nationally. If he doesn't, well, then, it's going to be hard to project him because he's a very productive player. But he's a name to file away and just see, Michigan tried to get a jump start on him early. So we'll see kind of how he progresses. So in total, I saw 6 guys with Michigan offers, 2 of them being commits.
How was the rain down there? I saw the weather wasn't too great.
It was pretty awful. ESPN had restrictions to where you can, record video. So between that and getting poured on, wasn't the most fun. But luckily I got out of Miami before that tropical storm hit, so I didn't get stuck down there.
Yeah, there you go. And you'll be back in the state of Michigan this weekend. We'll talk about that at the end. I was in East Lansing, as I mentioned at the top. I was seeing Andrell Anthony in East Lansing High School. Obviously, Andrell being a Michigan wide receiver commit. There's been some questions about whether or not he's going to stay in this class, especially since Michigan State was one of his top options there when he did decide at the end of July. But you said he's solid for now. Like, he's not really thinking about recruiting too much. They're in the midst of trying to make a state finals. They won handily 49-6 over Portage Central. But I'll talk about his game. Started out right off the bat with him making a huge impact, scoring on a 50-yard punt return for a touchdown. He looked athletic. He didn't really have a huge lane, so he just bounced it way outside, got it on the left side of the field, ends up going down the right sideline, So it was good to see him flash some of that speed. Wasn't a whole lot of speed on the other, side of the ball for Portage, but at the same time, he jetted past everybody and showed that he has that athleticism. He has that high-level speed, especially at the level he's playing at. As far as offensively, he was close on a couple big plays that would have really made it a really good game for him, but he only ended up finishing with 3 receptions for 10 yards, just a couple short passes, one little hitch on the outside that went for about 7 of those yards. So really the 2 other receptions were really short. He got bottled up on the edge. Talked to him after about that. He had a couple drops. He said that he had one over the middle. He was wide open, dropped it. He was already trying to turn up field, he said, but just took his eyes off of it, or was already trying to think about the next move he was going to make. So simple mistakes that he made out there. He said that him and his quarterback weren't really on the same page. He thinks that they should really start to pass more as they play better teams, which is fair. They ran the ball really well. They didn't need to throw a pass the entire game, and they would have still won this game. So I see where he's coming from. I think, just watching it from a team standpoint, if you're East Lansing, they are going to play, better competition where they are going to need to air it out a little bit more. So I think Andrell's right in that aspect. But he said he's not worried. He's going to get on the same page. But I do wish we saw a little bit more from him in terms of opportunities to catch the ball, maybe get the ball in space. He had one deep ball that would have been a highlight reel catch. He would have mossed a guy, but instead throw wasn't right on target, so he had to kind of bat it down and really play defender. And then the last thing, he played a little bit of defense. I would say he played about 12 to 15 snaps on the defensive side in this game. He played every snap on offense outside of, I think, the last possession where it was just a blowout. But defensively, he played when he needed to. When Portage started to put a drive together, he'd come out and guard the best receiver on their team, and never got targeted there. I wish we could have seen him maybe in that role, get a ball thrown his way. But it's kind of the same thing like you mentioned with Jayden Mcburrows. Andrell did a really good job not, giving any space where the quarterback was even going to throw over there. So overall, a pretty solid performance. Special teams being the highlighter there with his 50-yard punt return for a touchdown. But East Lansing is a legit team and could possibly end up making it to Ford Field for the state finals. And, Andrell Anthony, as far as his recruitment, we'll have more on that at the Wolverine.com. We got to talk to him for about 10 minutes after the game, and we went through everything having to do with his recruitment. Like I mentioned, some of the things he talked about with the game, not being on the same page with his quarterback. So we got a ton of stuff that'll be up there, so keep an eye out for that. As far as this weekend, EJU on Saturday will be seeing Wes Bloomfield against Sterling Heights Stevenson. So Sterling Heights Stevenson, obviously being the home of Rivals 100 Michigan offensive line commit Giovanni El Hadi. Wes Bloomfield with a ton of guys on their side. The headliner being Rivals 100 running back Donovan Edwards, 2021 target for Michigan, 2022 athlete target Dylan Tatum, athlete target Michael Williams, offensive line target in 2023 Amir Herring. So a ton of guys, loaded game, Saturday at noon. And then Friday night I will be out to see Michigan offensive line center commit Raheem Anderson. So we are going to be checking out some of those playoff games. Like we mentioned, big weekend for Michigan here. But what are you excited to see with an absolutely loaded game on Saturday?
Yeah, that game's going to be huge. Surprisingly, it's my first time seeing Wes Bloomfield all year. I've planned to see them, and then things happen, or I've gone out of state. So finally getting to see Wes Bloomfield, been really looking forward to this. I circled this as a potential game when the Michigan high school playoff brackets originally came out. So glad it happened and both teams advanced. So with Wes Bloomfield, I saw them last year and got to see Donovan Edwards, obviously, but this will be my first look at him as a senior. Looking forward to catching up with him and getting the latest on his recruitment. The guy, I'm excited to see Donovan, obviously, but the guy I'm most excited to see about is Dylan Tatum, just because he's a guy that I saw a lot in the offseason. Again, I saw Wes Bloomfield play twice last year, actually. But I didn't really hone in on him because he didn't have a Michigan offer yet. He wasn't playing a lot of running back. So I'm really excited to see him. and finally get a look at him in pads. I have seen guys like Amir Herring and Michael Williams and those guys at camps throughout the offseason. So also excited to see them in pads with Giovanni Alhadi. I saw him last year in the playoffs, actually, when Stevenson played Cass Tech. So it'll be fun to see him again and just see what he's improved on. Last year I had some question marks about his ability to finish blocks. It looks like he's improved in that area. And so I'm excited to get, an updated evaluation of El Hadi, especially in game. So it's a huge game for Michigan recruiting purposes. And it's going to take place right before Michigan hits the field against Wisconsin. So should be fun to get some of that coverage up before the Michigan-Wisconsin game starts. I might go to a game on Friday night. I'm not sure. Obviously, there's a lot happening in Ann Arbor this weekend with a lot of guys visiting. And so, we'll have updates on all that throughout the weekend. If I do go to a game on Friday night, it'll be East Point, Detroit King, to see some underclassmen targets and Dante Moore for like the millionth time this year. Just works out that way. But it should be a fun weekend. A lot of recruits coming into Ann Arbor, so it's going to be really busy for us in between games and covering the event.
Absolutely. So that's our coverage. We'll obviously have our follow-up show next week and break down what we saw from all of these guys. But remember to keep it locked over at thewolverine.com. Use the promo code BLUE60. You get 2 months of the premium content for free. We'll see you next time.